Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to NHI for putting this on. The river really needs some powerful allies like this. It's really wonderful. And it's looking out at the audience, I see retired university professors and geologists and botanists and major public lands activists, and there's quite an expert crowd here. And that's reinforcing and supportive. I mean, what do I know? I'm just a physical chemist. But what I've done is, throughout my work on the rivers, I've acted as kind of an integrator and translator for the work that hundreds of other people have done. And that's really important to know. This is not about me. This is a summary of what other people have worked out on this river. So I want to talk about the value of the river, what its current status is, and how we can protect it. I'm chair of the local group of the Sierra Club and the state board of the Sierra Club and with the Citizens Water Advocacy group. The Sierra Club has a major goal here to protect this river. A lot of that is through the work of the Water Sentinels, a citizen science group that measures the flow of the river on monthly intervals and has done so every month since 2007. That's kind of awesome. And the Citizens Water Advocacy group works on achieving a sustainable water supply for the Prescott Active Management Area and protecting the flora and fauna and flow of the upper Verde River. So both organizations are working for the river. So we'll talk about the Wild and Scenic River effort, the values of the Verde, current status and threats, and how we can protect it. So the photo there is just showing it's a really beautiful place. This river is unique. This is the only surviving living river in Arizona. Pre-development Arizona contains 6 perennial rivers. This graphic is from the Nature Conservancy, and you can see Colorado River here in green. It's regulated. Well, it's dammed, diverted, litigated, overallocated, never reaches the Gulf of California. And the wetlands here in the southern Colorado River were the largest wetlands in North America. Now they're a cracked, dry mud flat. This is an enormous loss that happened in the early 1900s. So we don't want to kind of just accept that kind of history. That's been a disaster for wildlife for 100 years. The Gila River comes out of southwestern New Mexico, flows west across Arizona to join the Colorado at Yuma. The orange lines indicate formerly perennial, which is the Nature Conservancy's very polite way of saying it's dry, except where there's a little tailwater in it that's full of salts and pesticides, agricultural tailwater. Big dry spot here. This is due to groundwater pumping in the Safford-Pima area, all done to support high water consumption, low value crops like cotton and alfalfa. So the Gila River has been degraded through most all of its length by cattle ranching and by software and by water diversions. Here's the Santa Cruz River, starts up here at Patagonia, curves into Mexico, comes back. No, it doesn't join the Gila anymore, has 2 wet spots. The orange spots on the map are affluent dominated. That means that the Santa Cruz has 2 wet spots from treated wastewater, one from the Nogales wastewater treatment plant and one from the city of Tucson. And much of the river channel is deeply incised into the desert and is just a OHV raceway. The San Pedro River flows north out of Mexico and it's down to a trickle that's struggling for life. Friends of the San Pedro has been working on protecting that river for decades. In 2012, it was down to 26% wet. That is, the length of the river, only 26% had water in it. In 2005, the gauge at Benson showed a completely dry river. The San Pedro is deeply threatened, and it's very important. It's a flyway for migration of birds from the Central Sierra Madre up across Arizona into the Pacific Northwest. So the San Pedro is alive, barely. It's a lot of litigation, a lot of people. Center for Biological Diversity is putting a tremendous amount of effort into protecting what's left of this little river. The Salt River begins at the junction of the Black and White Rivers in central eastern Arizona, and there's a green area here for Lake Roosevelt Reservoir. But there's 4 dams on the Salt River. It never flows to the Gila, unless there's a huge thunderstorms and precipitation events. And now they're going to even cut that down more by raising Bartlett Dam on the lower Verde River. So the Salt River is no longer a living river. By a living river, I mean that it has perennial flow, that it has natural vegetation on the banks, and that it has natural flood flow cycles. So that gets us down to, so the Gila River watershed is this lower 2/3 of Arizona. The little Colorado River here is an intermittent stream, and it flows into the Colorado every now and then. So that's not counted in this. The Bill Williams River is also intermittent. So the Verde's unique. It's the only surviving living river in the state. We've used up all the other rivers for economic development. So this river is a green artery pulsing through the heart of Arizona. When I came up with this phrase, I was thinking throbbing would be a better word, but then it was a little edgy, so I stuck with pulsing. So the map here is we're drilling down into the river. So the Verde River flows into the Salt River just east of Scottsdale. That's down here just off the map. So there's Bartlett Reservoir here. There's Horseshoe Reservoir here. As you move up, there's the Verde Wild and Scenic River that goes from Camp Verde down to here. It's 40.5 miles that was designated in 1980. Here's the Fossil Creek Wild and Scenic River, 16.5 miles designated in March 2009. The Middle Verde communities of the Verde Valley, Cottonwood, and Camp Verde and Clarkdale. And then in the upper river, the river begins up in Paulden. Here's Granite Creek flowing in at the upper river, Sullivan Dam, and flows down. So the upper Verde is above Clarkdale. So the box there is the area that we're concerned with protecting. And if you can protect the headwaters of the river, that protects everything downstream. So that's our focus on the upper Verde Wild and Scenic River. The Verde watershed is really, really important. There are 5 wilderness areas directly connected to the Verde River, 8 inventoried roadless areas, 3 national forests, 2 wild and scenic rivers, 3 important bird areas, 2 state parks, 1 wildlife preserve, 1 national monument, for a total of 542 contiguous protected acres. We've already invested in that. So protecting the upper river is really appropriate. The upper Verde Wild and Scenic River. So in 2011, the Sierra Club published the Citizens' Proposal for the Upper Verde Wild and Scenic River. I was kind of the prime author on that. 291 pages, a really complete review of all the features and assets and problems on the river. We couldn't move that proposal to Congress because The congressman at that time was a fellow named Paul Gosar. So we kind of just said, well, we're going to have to outlive this guy and go from there. So a couple years ago, Rachel Ellis called me. She used to teach at the Northland the Northland High School, private high school. What? North Point. Yeah, thanks. And I had taken her classes out onto the river for tours, but then she moved to Flagstaff, and she calls me a couple years ago and says, you know, now I'm working for American Rivers, and we're looking for a wild and scenic river project. How about the Verde? I go, let's do it. So American Rivers has stepped up and kind of rejuvenated this effort. So the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is the highest form of federal protection for rivers. It was approved, I think, in 1968 and signed by President Nixon or Johnson? Nixon. And what it does is it protects free-flowing rivers with outstandingly remarkable values. ORVs is kind of an acronym of art in this Wild and Scenic River business. So you can see there's a bunch of rivers and miles, but there's like this is like less than, this is like a couple % of the rivers in the country that are protected, very low. So what this does is it preserves the free-flowing character, i.e. it prevents large dams. Well, realistically, on the Upper Verde, there isn't that much water to make a large dam feasible. So this, and it would prevent dams. It creates a Federal Reserve water right, which actually on the Verde is not particularly going to help anything, and I'll talk more about that later. It ensures that the water quality is maintained or enhanced. That's good. Right now, the Water Sentinels, the Sierra Club Water Sentinels, have done water quality surveys on the river every other month since 2007 and tested for like, I don't know, a dozen separate things. I'm not going to bore you with the list. The bottom line is that the water quality in the river meets the Clean Water Act standards for body contact, irrigation, and livestock use. So that's better than Watson Lake. And it requires that a comprehensive river management plan be created within 3 years after designation. Sierra Club had to sue Tonto Forest to do the plan for the Verde Wild and Scenic River. It took them 20 years. It took the Coconino Forest 11 years to do the plan for the Fossil Creek Wild and Scenic River, something I worked on for a long time. The comprehensive management plan has to involve input from the community. And so now this makes an interesting thing because typically federal legislation is kind of one size fits all. Like the Wilderness Act says, you know, you got to do this and you have to manage it like this. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is much more flexible and it's much more community oriented. And this is a really important point. It has to involve input from the community, and that plan has to protect the outstanding and remarkable values for that river. So the idea is that the managing agency, in this case it would be Prescott National Forest, which is good because they're totally supportive of this effort. Prescott Forest would, working with the stakeholder group, would define the ORVs, the outstanding remarkable values. And I'll show you the ones that are up for selection right next. Then that plan has to maintain or enhance those values. It's a non-degradation or improvement policy. So what this does is this identifies the important characteristics on our local river. It identifies what the people in the area, how they want it managed, and it maintains or improves those values. So this is really cool. This is unusual. It makes it really a community river. So our coalition members, here's a whole big list. Yavapai Apache Nation is a huge supporter of this, and we really value that. Sierra Club American Rivers, American Whitewater. The Wilderness Society has been tremendously supportive with funding staff people and helping us with things. Defenders of Wildlife, Arizona Wild, Friends of the Verde, Natural History Institute, a lot of citizens. So there's a community effort behind this team that's working on this. What we are doing is building community support from business. So we have the 150 businesses that have signed letters of support for this effort and 4 chambers of commerce. Government support, we have letters of support from, catch this, Sedona, Camp Verde, Cottonwood, Clarkdale, Jerome, Prescott Valley, Prescott, Chino Valley, Yavapai County, Governor Hobbs, former Governor Babbitt, Arizona Historical Society. Did I forget some? Joe? Not from Paulden. I'm working on that. So there's tremendous support for this thing. Senators. So then we're reaching out to our congressmen and representatives, and we have legislation written, ready to introduce. It's actually sitting on Senator Kelly's desk right now. So we've made tremendous progress. Here we are visiting in 2022 or 3. Here's Kristen Cinema, and check her office out. 20-foot high ceilings and these nice purple walls. I mean, she was styling, you know. She was supportive, but of course she's no longer senator. It's Ruben Gallego, who is extremely supportive. We've got, here's Mark Kelly. He and his staff have been very supportive and behind this. We're grateful for that. You should take note of that. And here we are with Representative Crane in front of his office. So this is Rachel Ellis from American Rivers. This is Tanya Lewis. She's the chair of the Yavapai Apache Nation. She came with us to help us lobby. That's how much they support it. Wait, this is Tanya. This was Nancy Ruiz, the environmental protector. And that's Chairman Crane, and this is just some guy off the street. So here's the proposal. It would take the lower 1.6 miles of Granite Creek and then the Verde main stem from Sullivan Dam down to just above Clarkdale. It stops at the Prescott Forest boundary just upstream from Clarkdale, just upstream from Tapco, if you know where that is. And it includes all of Sycamore Creek. It's roughly 74 miles. And that's what we're trying to protect. You know, if the framers of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act in Congress in 1968 had a picture, a vision of what they wanted to accomplish and what they wanted to protect, it would have been this river. The Verde fits perfectly. Here's the outstanding, remarkable values, 6 of them: scenic, recreational, cultural, wildlife, fisheries, and botanic. So, recreation. So here's one of my famous wet foot Verde hiking ordeals that some people went on that most everyone survived. We can only lose 1 out of 10 on these trips. So there's an osprey flying over. This is a roofed ruin overlooking Sycamore Canyon. There's tremendous cultural values along the river. So so we've been doing overflights with Echo Flights, a nonprofit that flies elected officials and important people over special areas to give them an idea and help engender their support. So we've had 2 sessions of Echo Flights and taken out city councilmen, mayors, This was the first one. I was kind of the tour guide on the trip. It's looking up Sycamore Canyon at San Francisco Peaks. Pretty sweet, huh? Another example of the scenery on the Verde, you know, you've got green vegetation, blue sky, flowing water, red rocks. It's just all the primal colors that are so satisfying to us. Tremendous recreational resource. This was another one of my wet foot hike ordeals on the river. That's my wife, and this is Sally, who was 78 at the time, from Sedona, going for it. You know, that was great. So, you know, we have a growing demand for recreation. There's more people. We don't have any more land. We need to protect what we've got so that people can enjoy themselves in healthy for the body, healthy for the mind recreation, hiking, fishing, hunting, riding horses, photography. All these things are permissible on the Wild and Scenic River. So strengthening recreation access is a really important aspect of the plan. Cultural sites, there's tremendous amounts of rock art. This is a formerly inhabited area on top of a butte in the Upper Verde. There's the remnants of a cliff structure. So the forest archaeologist tells me that there's 58 archaeological sites on the river that would qualify for inclusion in the National Historic Register, and he's not counting the whole river because the upper 6 miles is not part of the forest, it's part of the Game and Fish Department, and the lower, and then he's not counting Sycamore Canyon. So it's going to be 6 or 7 dozen sites. I mean, this area is rich. It's been a corridor for indigenous people to move and to hunt and to live for thousands of years. There's sites at Montezuma as well that have been dated for 11,000 BC. So this is very important, and the cultures that are represented there would be Northern Hohokam, Southern Sinawa, Hopi, Navajo, Apache, and many other tribes. This is an archaeoobservatory site on the Upper River. So if you stand here and you look at Little Thumb Butte, there's Big Thumb Buttes in Prescott. See, Paulden has Little Thumb Butte. And if you look, you stand there at December 21st, right, the shortest day of the year, right, at dawn, you're going to freeze your butt off. The first year we did that to see if this worked, it was cloudy and it was useless. So we went back again and froze again the next year and saw the sunrise right on top of Little Thumb Butte. So this was some kind of signal or timing thing, a story that was told there. So that's very cool. Botanic resources. There's way too many cattails, tremendous old cottonwood trees. The riparian forest along the river. You know, the Verde has a large fraction of the surviving riparian forest in the state of Arizona because we've wiped out all our other rivers. We've wiped out the riparian forest. Riparian forest is trees that have to have their roots in contact with groundwater. Species examples would be Arizona ash, black willow, or Gooding's willow, red willow, hackberry, alder. Did I miss something, you experts out there? Box elders, a lot of box elders actually. And of course sycamores, lower elevation down. So the box elders and the sycamores tend to be down below Perkinsville. So when the box elders light up, that's in the maple family, right? And so they light up in the fall. And I want to tell you that walking down the Verde in the fall is just as spectacular as Oak Creek. This place is a hidden gem that is little known and underappreciated. So here we have stuff. Actually, All right. And then the watershed wildlife is just off the charts. This is the thing that excites me most. So in our 2011 citizens proposal, I had Tony Kryzak, a Prescott resident, who's now passed away. And he was a very accomplished research scientist with hundreds of publications and a long history in academia. He was a polymath. He had degrees in mathematics, physics, and ecology. He was an amazing guy, but he did a biological inventory of the Verde watershed, and I'll just summarize it for you here. It's 5.8% of Arizona's land area, 6,600 square miles. There are 478 vertebrate species, which is 69% of the total species count in the state of Arizona. Now, some of that, sometimes people tell me they're not, scientists, Walt, tell me that they're not surprised by that, but because water is life, and ecologists have a rule of thumb that in an arid environment, 80% of species spend some or all of their life cycle in riparian areas. So, but when you think that we've wiped out all the other habitats, this is where they can go. And they're on the Verde. 209 breeding bird species, 78% of the count in the state, 25 of 28 Arizona bats, 17 of 19 carnivores, and 6 of 8 native ungulates. So in the photos here, we've got an otter, a beaver dam, a javelina, and a bald eagle. There's golden eagles there also. Tremendous number of raptors. So this place is really phenomenal. Bunch of reptiles and amphibians. It's a refugia for wildlife. Why? So okay, let's zoom back out to the southwest. You see that there's ecoregions. Here's a Mojave Desert ecoregion, the Colorado Plateau, Arizona, New Mexico Mountains, Sonoran Desert, and the Apache Highlands are all surrounding the Verde watershed. And so it obtains influences of the plants and animals in all those areas. That's one reason for the remarkable biodiversity in this watershed. Another reason has to do with geology. And so this is something that most people don't think about, but let's do. So southwestern Arizona is part of the Basin and Range province. So this was formed 15-ish million years ago as the Earth crust went through tectonic movements and stretching. And as it stretched, faults formed, lava came up and formed basalt mountain ridges, and the blocks in the middle fell down to form basins. And so this Basin and Range province extends east from the Sierra Nevada mountains to here, and south from Idaho down to the Penacate Desert in Mexico. It's one of the major geologic provinces in North America. The Colorado Plateau, of course, is part of the North American craton, one of the most stable and ancient parts of the entire continent, and it's capped with this layer of sedimentary rocks that you see when you look in the Grand Canyon. So the Verde watershed is in a transition zone between the two. As such, it has soils that are characteristic of the Basin and Range. It's soils derived from the basalts that are acidic. It has soils from the Colorado Plateau, which is sandstones and limestones, marine deposit rocks that make alkaline soils. It has then clays and a whole mixture of things. The disturbance zone here creates faulting, and these basins then fill up with water, so there's water in this, groundwater in here. The groundwater leaks out at Verde Springs and supports this. Water is life. The water supports life. The geologic chaos between these two gives you tremendous numbers of microhabitats facing different directions with different slopes different elevations, different soils, all with water. These are the conditions for an explosion of life, and that's what you see. It's pretty cool. So, endangered species. The Endangered Species Act lists 19 species in the Verde watershed. That's huge. Like Hawaii has like 51, right? Which is phenomenal. But 19 species in this watershed under the ESA is enormous. That's one indication of the value here. There's an additional 16 sensitive species that Game and Fish and Prescott Forest are watching very closely. So you've got a belted kingfisher here. That's not listed, but I like them because they have a cool punk hairdo. And a shovel, a Mexican garter snake, peregrine falcon. This is a yellow-billed cuckoo, which is listed under the ESA with critical habitat in the Upper Verde. And bald eagle was just delisted. You know, the Sierra Club fought to keep. This is part of this is a subpopulation, the desert nesting bald eagle. The Sierra Club fought with Fish and Wildlife Service for 10 years trying to keep that listed. We lost. But they're doing well. There's like 90 nesting pairs of desert nesting bald eagles in Arizona. Many of them are in the Verde watershed. These birds fly to the Pacific Northwest and the northern Midwest. They leave in June. They come back in October, and they breed here in Arizona. So these are kind of our eagles. Game and Fish has put collars tracking these birds and track their flight path up and back and up and back. They always come back to their home, which is our home. Native fish. We had 33 original native fish, 3 extinct, 19 are on the ESA list. The Upper Verde contains critical habitat for 3 ESA listed native fish. The spiked ace, the razorback sucker. There's a loach minnow also, but the loach minnow photo I have, it looks sort of dead. I don't like to show it. This is a round-tailed chub and a Sonora sucker. These were prevalent in waters all across the western United States, and now they're mainly found here in Arizona in some of our surviving streams. So the Verde is one of 4 primary native fish habitats in Arizona. The others would be Aravaipa Creek, Eagle Creek, Fossil Creek, and the Verde River. And I got bad news about that, about the Verde's contribution to that coming up. 3 important bird areas: Tuzigoot, Watson Lake, and the Upper Verde Wildlife Area, IBA. Some details here about what they found. Great blue herons are full year resident, nesting, breeding residents. Turkey vulture. People don't like vultures because they eat carrion, but these are the most magnificent birds. They're wonderful flyers. Here's our osprey again, and this is a common blackhawk, which is not common, but they are all resident in the Upper Verde. Golden eagle, I was just walking in the wildlife area with one of the game wardens from Game and Fish, and he said, you know, there's 4 golden eagle nests in this wildlife area. I go, what? I didn't know that. I've never seen them. I got to find those. Bald eagles. And of course, we have a black-tailed rattlesnake. These are really pretty. They're kind of mild-mannered for rattlesnakes. They're not aggressive. They're really beautiful. So what's wrong with, if the Wild and Scenic Act protects all these outstanding, remarkable values I just reviewed, what's wrong with it? What kind of restrictions are on it? And so this handout I have over on the table. So there's a few there. If you're interested, you can take that. There's no restriction on hunting, fishing, or other recreational activities. Actually, it will enhance those things. Private land, it has no authority to acquire or regulate or rezone private land. There is a little bit of private land within our proposal. It is, much of it is Perkinsville Ranch. So all the private land is subject to existing county zoning and regulations. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act does not prevent access to those lands. It doesn't constrain the landowner's ability to control access to their lands. So it respects private land. In terms of water rights, it does get a federal, Wild and Scenic designation creates a Federal Reserve in-stream water right. Now, an in-stream water right is for a specified reach of the stream with a certain amount of flow. And it's, the water cannot be removed from the stream bed. So, and the beneficial use is for wildlife and recreation. So an in-stream flow right doesn't threaten any other water rights. That the state administers these federal rights, and they're in line with other water claimants. So in the Verde watershed, there's probably 10 times as many claims on water as there is wet water. And so this is a train wreck that's heading for the Verde Valley as the Gila adjudication moves into the Verde Valley. This question probably won't be resolved for decades. And it's, it creates tremendous uncertainty for business and land management. So we'd like to get that settled. So the water right that the feds give would have a priority date as of, okay, suppose we get it through the next Congress in 2026. Let's think positive, hopeful. You know, it's that would have a seniority date of 2026. There's prior appropriative water rights on the Verde River dating from time immemorial. That's the federal right date, priority date for the Yavapai, Fort McDowell Yavapai tribe. Yavapai Apache Nation has a higher priority date. Salt River Pima Maricopa tribe has a high priority date. So the ditch companies in the Verde Valley have priority dates that would be from the 1860s. Salt River Project has priority dates dating from the early 1900s. So there's so many prior rights that the Federal Reserve in-stream flow right for the river isn't going to be of any benefit at all. And Game and Fish already has an in-stream flow right for the Upper Verde dating from 2006, and Prescott Forest has a right application in that would have a priority date of 1988. So the right, people express concern. I'm burning in on this point because people express concern, and it is unfortunately a real and current concern, that the Federal Reserve water rights associated with wild and scenic designation will impinge or restrict others' ability to extract water, river water and groundwater. It just ain't so. So, current status and threats. So this is the bridge over, I was standing on Sullivan Dam looking downstream, taking this photo in the clouds, and it all looks kind of ominous. And this is an ominous part of the talk. So one threat here is non-native aquatic species. So we have green sunfish and red-eye bass. These directly predate on native fish. They occupy their habitat, they consume their food supply, and this is the major problem we have on the Upper Verde. When we do fish count surveys, you know, there's walk up and down the river and we shock the fish and stun them and net them and identify them and measure them and put the non-natives back, put the natives back unharmed, and the non-natives we usually throw up on the bank for the birds. So when we do that, we see that normally the fish, the stream has 80% non-natives, 20% natives, except after a big flood, you know. So the Verde has, like in most southwestern desert rivers, has periodic flash floods that are very strong. After one of those floods, it'll be 80% native, 20% non-native. And it's kind of cool. The reason for that is that these non-native aquatic species are mainly from the Mississippi River watershed. And they were put there by Game and Fish in the 1950s in an attempt to establish a cold water sport fishery. Bad management. Now we're paying the price for that. Well, these fish in the Mississippi don't know how to handle flood flows. I mean, the Mississippi floods, but it's just a big, sluggish flowing river. You know, is it 10 miles wide or 1 mile wide, you know? And so the native fish know how to handle those flood flows. The non-natives don't. So the non-natives all get washed down to Horseshoe Reservoir. That's cool. However, in a couple years, it bounces back to the same 80% non-native. So flood flows really help the river. They're a fundamental part of the ecology of these riverine ecosystems. Other non-native species. This is a red shiner. This is a escaped bait fish from fishermen letting their bait bucket go. This is a yellow bullhead. Big mouth. Here's a bullfrog. Big mouths. These species with big mouths, they can eat ducklings whole. I mean, they're very strong predators that upset the system. And then finally a crayfish. And no, this was not in Louisiana. That was on the Verde. They're devastating. They are omnivorous. They eat vegetation, fish eggs, whatever. They're a problem. And I'm not sure where they came from. But what we need to solve that, we need a bunch of 9-year-old boys. We each give them a string with a piece of bacon on the end, and we can take care of this. So I've been aware that there are native fish problems on the Verde for a long time, but in 2023, the U.S. Forest Service Rocky Mountain Research Station based in Flagstaff released a report that said that they had done eDNA studies on the river. They did a lot of other studies too. But eDNA studies are pretty cool. Basically, you can just scoop up a liter of river water and you run it through a big DNA analyzer and it prints out the species that are living in there. Maybe I've oversimplified that process a little bit, but that's the idea. That's totally cool. When they did that, they found no native fish in the upper 10 kilometers of the river. Game and Fish went in and did hand count surveys on the river, electrofishing. They found one Sonora sucker in the upper 18 miles of the river. We have extirpated native fish from the upper part of the upper Verde. We've just lost half of one of Arizona's 4 native fish streams. That shocked me. That was like, this happened in the space of a few years. This is horrible. We have to do something about that. So what we're doing is Natural History Institute and Sierra Club are running a science conference here in November, where we'll invite the researchers that do this stuff to gather together and consider all this stuff and get a holistic understanding of the way the river operates and how it and its condition, and then work to begin doing something. Game and Fish is not managing this place very well. You know, Prescott Forest is legally responsible for managing the habitat. Game and Fish is responsible for measuring the critters. They need to get together and they need to work on a plan to restore this river. That's what our conference is going to work on. Another threat is trespass grazing. And so the Forest Service, cattle grazing is one of the most damaging things you can do to repair an environment. So one of the founders of NHI, Tom Fleischner, did a nice book detailing this and all the, so NHI has had its fingers in this. And the Center for Biological Diversity did a big study on it, and Joe Trudeau back there walked the river and mapped this whole thing and found the damaged spots. And so now, and then there was a lawsuit, and then the forest, now Prescott Forest is managing the trespass grazing pretty well. I mean, these cattle are big. These are 1,500-pound animals, and there's water and grass down there. They can walk through a fence. And so we're always going to have cattle on the river. So this is a maintenance thing. Prescott Forest is doing a decent job of it. So thanks to them for stepping up and doing what they should have been doing all along. I want to point out other forests in Arizona are not doing such a hot job. So this is still a really relevant topic for protecting riparian areas. Destructive recreation is a big one. You know, when I started walking up and down the river in 2006, I'd see a lot of this. Off-highway vehicle trails right through the river, squashing the spike dace eggs. I mean, you can't do that. I yammered at Prescott Forest for 3 years to get them to enforce their rules. It's always been illegal. But they did, and so now illegal OHV access on the river is every few years we get one minor incursion that they take and they're on it. So Prescott Forest is doing a much better job managing the river. Careless campers. It's always Bud Light, Coors Light, you know, illegal campfire, trash, compacted riverbanks. This is a problem. This has been a huge problem, especially at Perkinsville Bridge. So this is an aerial shot of Perkinsville Bridge. This is County Road 71. So Chino Valley is up this way, 22 miles. Here's the Verde River. This is west to the top. And so this is one of the only roads that cross the upper Verde River. And it has good access from both Williams, Chino Valley, and Jerome. So it's a popular spot. This is a user-created road. They took down barriers, moved boulders, drove through there, compacted a 2-acre area underneath the bridge. There's people in there camping now. This is all illegal. Parking down there. Here's a chainsaw. What are they doing? They're cutting the roots off riparian trees for firewood, compacted river banks, rope swings. That's what it should look like. So this place was grossly misused. Illegal shooting, rock dams. This is critical habitat for 3 fish. You know, you're changing the aquatic environment when you do this. We need riffles, not pools. So graffiti on the bridge, swings. So this place was a mess. And then some guy got shot down there in a dispute between 2 campers. That was in 2021. So somebody was playing music too loud. Somebody complained about it, and then the complainer got shot. So I go down there after a 4th of July weekend. There'll be 40 RVs parked down there. And after they're all gone, each of those little spots is a pile of human feces. So I took this in to Dale Dieter, the supervisor for the forest, and said, either you do something on this, or I'm going to notify county health, state health, all the newspapers. You got to fix this. This is ridiculous. The Sierra Club's been complaining about this for 14 years, and the forest hadn't done anything. Finally, the Sierra Club paid to put a porta potty down there. Dieter said, you're right, we're going to fix this. So they closed it and they made it a day use area. Since then, no piles of crap, very little trash. The landscape is recovering, plants are growing back. The riverbanks look better. It's a day use area. There's still people that go down there and picnic and enjoy the place, and we want people to enjoy the place, right? So the Sierra Club had a paint party. We painted out all the graffiti, had a great time, didn't get too much paint on ourselves. And then we had a big party down there, and we planted some red willow posts to try and revegetate the riverbank. And we had Don Decker, who's a religious leader of the Yavapai Apache Nation. Used to work at Yavapai College, actually, when I worked there. And Jimmy, forget his last name, but he's from the now I'm forgetting the name of his tribe, but it was in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So we had a whole ceremony and an indigenous blessing, and about 75 people turned up, and it was great, you know, to try and send the river on a new course. So all that's fine. We're making progress there. This is the big one, a threat to the flow in the river. So this is a hydrograph, and this shows you some elements of river flow. So on this graph, this is cubic feet per second going up here. This is a logarithmic scale. This is from water year 1978, which starts in October 1, 1977, up to the end of September 78. And here you see the classic flow pattern for the river. There's a low flow that's predominant most of the time. That's what we call the base flow. And then we have these spikes in flow. These are those flash floods. So this is 6,200 CFS. And that went up in probably half an hour. And then it comes back down within a space of a week or so and trickles back down to base flow. So you get the winter storms, we get the biggest peaks. The summer spikes are from thunderstorms. So the base flow is the key thing here. The base flow is what keeps water in the river 24/7. Without base flow, aquatic species are dead. Base flow is the big issue. So, I just wanted to show you this is Sullivan Dam, and this is like 6,000 or 8,000. I forget the date on this. So when just to kind of give some physical context to those spikes on the chart, there's a lot of water going down there. And then after the flood, everything is sweet and pretty, right? So I want to talk about the groundwater flow connection to the Verde. This is the most important factor in the future of this river. So let's take a minute to understand just a teeny bit of the science. So it rains, lands on the ground, some water infiltrates into the ground. Now in this area, less than 2% of the precipitation incident on the ground surface actually makes it into the aquifer. Most of this infiltration happens in dry washes, ephemeral washes. But some of the rainwater gets into groundwater. Groundwater flows downhill through the rocks, and the stream is the lowest point in the watershed, and that's the Verde. So when it rains here, it flows into Granite Creek, and Granite Creek flows into the Verde. So natural recharge flows to the stream through the groundwater system. Climate change is reducing the base flow because higher temperatures. What we're seeing now in Prescott, we're seeing about 1.5 degrees higher temperatures than normal, than the long-term average. The predictions, if you do a meta-analysis of all the climate models and look and project what future temperatures are going to be in this area, by 2085, we're going to have summer maximum temperatures 10 degrees higher than they are now. So how comfortable were you last week when it was 104? Well, it's going to be 114. Phoenix weather is coming up to us. That's happening. That's the major driver. As it turns out, precipitation levels remain fairly constant through 2085. It's heat. And so heat causes increased evaporation, reduced recharge, and reduced stream flow. I just got ahead of myself. There you go. Increased evaporation, increased transpiration. Now this is not under our immediate control. In the global sense, we're responsible for this in the long term. If we started immediately and cut off, put no greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we're still going to have temperature increases going on for the next decades. We can't stop that train right away. So the point is that due to conditions outside of our immediate remedy, the river is very fragile and vulnerable. The other thing is that groundwater pumping captures stream flow. Groundwater pumping from a well here, it has lowered the water table around the well, and sucking water out of this well is actually pulling water out of the river into the well. Groundwater pumping captures stream flow. This can happen for wells. This can reduce stream flow when the well is downstream of the measurement point you're talking about. These are very wide area effects. That's a basic hydrologic principle, and this, of course, this graphic comes from USGS. So, due to geology, Verde Springs is especially sensitive. Now, Verde Springs is the beginning of perennial flow in the river. So I showed you the Sullivan Dam flood flow, that's mile 0. Verde Springs is at mile 2, just about 100 yards downstream of where Granite Creek enters the Verde. So Verde Springs is very sensitive to this. So I wanted to show how the river flow changes. I'm going to come back to Verde Springs in a second. How does the river flow change as you move downstream? So here is the USGS Paulden gauge, continuously recording stream gauge operated by USGS, and that's at mile 10. So the Sierra Club Water Sentinels did this thing. It's called a seepage study. So we measured by hand, we hiked in and measured by hand the flow at all these points, roughly a mile apart. And you can see that it's 21 cubic feet per second, CFS here, down to 17 here, 16, pops up to 18. There's a little spring that comes in here, down to 16. This is where Hell Canyon enters with the Verde. This is Bear Siding area. So we see flows here as low as 11.6 CFS. And then by the time you get to Perkinsville Bridge is up to 13.9. So this is totally normal for the surface flow in a river to vary throughout its length because there's an active interchange of groundwater and surface water. But the real thing that is we have to allow for is that 21 here, 14-ish here, this is mile 26, mile 21. So mile 10, 10-ish and mile 26-ish. So it's 16 miles river is represented here. And that 16 miles, it went from 21 down to 14. We lost 7 CFS. This is a losing reach of river. We think that water is basically seeping into the riverbed because the area water table is underneath the waterbed, the riverbed. So that is a really critical fact. This graph shows you the losses in flow between Paulden and Perkinsville as determined by the Water Sentinel. So 8.6, 6.4, COVID. So let's just call it 7, just for the purposes of argument. 7 CFS disappears from the Paulden gauge to Perkinsville. So how much flow is at the Paulden gauge? So here we go through 36 spreadsheets of calculations and come up with this graph that shows you this is the base flow in the river measured at river mile 10, the Paulden gauge. So it was increasing up until the mid-1990s. The mid-1990s is where we see area average temperatures begin to increase a lot. And so all of a sudden the river flow goes down. And it's going down at about 1/3 of a CFS per year. So 2023 it was 13.4. I just did the numbers for 2024. It was down to 13. The trend continues. So if you have 13 CFS at Perkinsville and it's declining, at Paulden, 13, and it's declining at 1/3 of a CFS per year, how long before the river's dry? You divide 13 by 0.3, you know, so it's like 4 decades, right? I mean, these are pretty loose numbers, right? 4 decades, we have a dry river at mile 10. This is due to a combination of climate change and groundwater pumping in the Big Chino Valley. And so if it's 13 at Perkinsville and we lose 7 on the way down, if it's 13 at Paulden and we lose 7 on the way down to Perkinsville, how much is left at Perkinsville? 6 or 7. If it's declining at a third of an acre, a third of a CFS per year, how long before it's dry at Perkinsville? 20 years. So this is not your typical long-running crisis. This is now. This river is deeply threatened now. We need to do something. I've held in my hand endangered fish at Perkinsville Bridge. That's one of the spots on the river that'll get dried up. So here's our Verde River. This is a Google Earth shot from like 40 miles. This is Perkinsville Bridge. Here's Verde Springs. This is the Big Chino Valley. Paulden is in here. Here's the Little Chino watershed. Prescott's here. Prescott Valley is here. The Prescott Active Management Area extends out into here. I haven't shown that on this graph. The water that comes out of Verde Springs, 14% is from the Little Chino watershed. Del Rio Springs, at the northern edge of this aquifer, is the only surface water outlet. Prescott has all its municipal, Prescott takes most of its municipal well water. Prescott produces most of its municipal water from wells in central Chino Valley, pumps it up here. Groundwater flows north. Naturally, these wells intercept water that was naturally destined to flow out at Del Rio Springs in the Verde River and brings it in for us to use in our faucets and homes. All the water you use is groundwater. So, groundwater levels in this aquifer are now decreased 140, 150 feet. Del Rio Springs is now running at 5% of its pre-development flow. 5%. It's a trickle. When I moved here, I've lived here 50-something years. When I moved here, Del Rio Springs was a gushing stream, and that was the historical headwaters of the Verde River. Now, Del Rio Springs is a trickle like that. It's nothing, and it's destined to dry up. ADWR predicted it would dry up in 2025. It's right on schedule. Groundwater pumping has captured stream flow. There's a real live example right now. We're afraid the same thing happens in the Big Chino aquifer, which supplies 80 to 86% of the flow of Verde Springs. Verde Springs is the only source of water for the first 25 miles of the river. Between Paulden and Perkinsville, this is the only source of water. So this part of the river is not threatened as much. This fault system right here actually brings in water from the Colorado Plateau aquifers to the north. And so by the time you get down to Clarkdale in here, the flow might be 65 cubic feet per second, whereas here, if we're lucky, we hit 20. So we're worried the big threat is for this upper 25 miles, and it's a severe threat. Groundwater from the Big Chino aquifer is the source of the base flow. When you remove water from this aquifer, you're removing water from the river. Groundwater levels in the Big Chino are very closely associated with the flow of Verde Springs. This is a graph from the Montgomery & Associates, respected hydrology consulting firm that was hired by the Nature Conservancy to help us document some of this stuff. So these, the line is the flow from Verde Springs, and the different dots are the water levels in wells. And the interesting thing is that the water level in the wells, you know, they're running around 4255, let's say, and the elevation of Verde Springs is 4240. It's 15 feet. The water level in Paulden, then the Big Chino Aquifer, is only 15 feet above Verde Springs. There's 15 feet of hydraulic head that's pushing groundwater out of the springs. Anything that reduces the water level in the Big Chino Aquifer is going to have an immediate and large effect on Verde Springs. There's a very close hydrologic connection between these two. So, big focus here. I mean, the Little Chino is toast. The Little Chino Aquifer, I don't see how we're not going to be able to fix that. It's too late. The Big Chino, the big problem hasn't happened yet. We can fix that. There's broad scientific agreement on what I just told you. I don't want to go through this. Let me just put the names up here and let you look at them. This one is especially telling. You know, cities tend to hire consultants that tell them what they hope to be true. You know, that's the consultant thing. We call them hydrostitutes. but there's broad scientific opinion. What I'm telling you, I'm not making this up, right? This is a capture diagram. What it shows is, all right, so here's Verde Springs, here's the Verde River. So the red areas, this is showing you if you pump water out of the red area, it's going to have a near immediate effect, and 90% of the pumping will be reflected in a reduced flow. So the further you get from the springs, the more distant in time and the less the effect. So controlling pumping in this area in Paulden area is really critical. So there's three types of groundwater pumping that constitute a threat. One is rural development. Just as Paulden grows up the valley, as Williamson Valley grows, groundwater pumping in there can dry up the river. At a 1.3% annual growth rate, which is less than it is now, in 100 years, just domestic water consumption would dry up the river. The current base flow is less than 10,000 acre-feet per year. Another class would be agricultural pumping. These are photos from the upper Big Chino Valley, which used to be a major agricultural area, but since the late 1960s, that's just all gone away. Big well. So another threat is expanded agricultural irrigation. Potential demand could be 25,000 acre-feet or more. The Big Chino is nice ag land. It's been ag up there before. Previous ag pumping history has been in the 25,000 acre-foot range. You know, when Big Ag moved into the Wilcox, into the Sulphur Springs Valley, all of a sudden groundwater pumping increased hundreds of thousands of acre-feet. When the Sierra Nevadas had a big drought, and the farmers in the Central California Valley, Central Valley, couldn't get irrigation water, they plowed up their almond orchards, and they moved to do pistachios and grapes in the Harquahala Valley near Kingman. Groundwater pumping jumped up 40,000 acre-feet per year. So that could happen here. It's totally illegal under Arizona law. And of course, you've all heard the thing about alfalfa and Fotomonte near Yuma and that. Arizona water law is just bankrupt on this. There are no controls on groundwater pumping outside of active management areas. And in active management areas, the control is like a feather. So This is a huge problem. There's no legal pumping limit. This is the responsibility of the Arizona legislature, which last year failed for the second year in a row to do anything significant on rural groundwater management. Governor Hobbs did a great bill. It didn't even get a hearing because the representative from Cochise County, Gail Griffin, wouldn't put it on the committee agenda. So there's a big fuss going on about this now for next year. This is one thing I'd like you all to stay aware of and maybe use your voice to help push something forward. So that could dry up the river. Then the third existential threat, notice each one of these is a total deal breaker, is municipal pumping. So this is a photo from Prescott's production facility on Highway 89 in Chino Valley. So Prescott and Prescott Valley have the big Chino Water Ranch, and that then has the ability to transfer 12,000 acre feet a year, 8 to 12,000. They haven't said how much they're going to use. They have legal rights for 12,000. There would be a pipeline then that went from, this was part of the old K4 ranch, I think, and would get transferred to Chino Valley. Then a pipeline splits to Prescott Valley and some to Prescott. Prescott has 54% of the project. Prescott Valley has 46%. Prescott Valley really wants this water. Prescott has a fairly decent water portfolio, enough to grow this community to 75,000-ish in the next 20 years. That would be almost a 5% growth rate. Prescott Valley does not have water resources. They have even more aggressive growth goals. So they really want this big Chino water. So if you export 12,000 acre feet out of here, that's more than the river flow. It's a deal breaker, right? But the state legislature authorized additional water transfers out of there that can be used by any community. So Chino Valley has plans to transfer 645 acre feet of historically irrigated acreage water out of the old Wineglass Ranch, maybe in the next 2 decades. But Chino Valley is talking about mitigating their impacts on the river. They say that they will actually improve the river flow. They haven't written that down, but they've been saying that since 2009. That's really good. And I want to give Chino Valley big kudos for doing the right thing. Prescott Valley has only recently even begun to recognize that mitigation might be necessary. This is a big problem, and they're really pushing the city of Prescott to build this pipeline. The pipeline is going to cost, without mitigation, probably $400 million. So this is the big immediate threat to the river. So conclusions. The Verde River is now diminished and ecologically degraded. We have no native fish in the upper 18 miles. And I don't think I mentioned that when I did native fish surveys on that river, that literally in that upper river, as we're walking across in waders, you could catch a big round-tailed chub between your legs and trip. I mean, they were thick in there. There was thousands of fish in the river, and now we don't have any. The flow in the river is now, the pre-development flow is 28 cubic feet per second, and now it's 13. So it's diminished in flow and ecologically degraded. Legally permitted groundwater pumping will dry up this river. We have to constrain groundwater pumping to protect this river. So I got started on all this campaigning I do, in an attempt to protect the river. And when I figured this out, that's when I got involved with CWAG, and we started working on water policy and allocation. But for me, it's all about the river. But here's the other sobering thing. Even when we get the Wild and Scenic River, the federal government can't fully protect it because the federal water rights don't do the job, and the boundaries of the river don't cover the area that is the threat, which is the Big Chino Valley. So we need other solutions. And we need the public behind it. You know, it's your river, it's your choice. This is Railroad Draw, an ephemeral wash on the Upper Verde. This is what it looks like now. You got a choice. So the solution here is to become stewards of the river, not exploiters of it. This is a political problem. We know how to fix this. We can do it. We need the political will to do it, and you guys are the political will. One solution is the Upper Verde River Base Flow Preservation Act, which I'm getting ready to lay on Representative Selena Bliss's desk next week. Realistically, it doesn't stand a breath of a chance of getting through the legislature this year, but we're going to get started with it. This would require the Prescott and Prescott Valley have already promised that they would mitigate any harm to the river. But this would put it into state law and put Arizona Department of Water Resources as the guardian, the supervisor, the guarantor of their mitigation efforts. You can't have the foxes guarding the hen house. So ADWR oversight, but it doesn't change the existing state law that's granted these communities the ability to export water. That's just not going to happen. We're going to have to live with that. Another solution is the Verde Headwaters State Park. So just last year, Trust for Public Land did an enormously wonderful job. If you ever get a fund appeal from them, do it. That's a great group. They've helped the Verde watershed in many locations. They're heroes, Trust for Public Land. They talked the Arizona legislature into allocating $7 million to purchase Del Rio Springs. And Yavapai County came up with $1.5 million. The Nature Conservancy came up with $500,000. 720 acres has now been transferred into state lands. That's this orange area. This is an easement that will then connect the Peavine Trail, which ends right here, all the way to the Verde Headwaters. We're going to have a Peavine Trail that goes from the Verde Headwaters to Watson Lake. Is that cool or what? That was a big part of this state park. Verde Springs is right here. This orange parcel is 286 acres. It's not yet been purchased. We're working on that. This is all part of the state park. This area had the historic buildings from the Fred Harvey dairy barn and milking shed, etc., and the mule barn. And so state parks didn't want that because they didn't want the responsibility for the buildings. So the town of Chino Valley stepped up and bought it, 22 acres. And they're going to restore those buildings and make that as a public asset, historical asset. And there's this little parcel here that separates the state park area around Sullivan Lake from the Verde River corridor. And that's the only piece of private land that is a block. And so the Prescott Climbing Club, I'm forgetting the exact name of the coalition. Climbers Coalition did a big fundraiser. They started a campaign, did a big fundraiser. They raised $50,000 for it. Yavapai County kicked in $150,000. Trust for Public Land arranged $200,000 from the Land and Water Conservation Fund state shares that's been approved by the State Parks Board. So they have $400,000 to purchase that parcel, and that's in process now. When that happens, we will have a trail along the Verde River from the state park all the way down to Perkinsville. Prescott Forest wants to do that. This is all in the future. This is what's possible. And you see that some of these solutions have occurred because people have asked for it and worked for it, and that's you. So, this doesn't have any direct effect on Big Chino pumping or anything, but it's certainly the Wild and Scenic designation, the Verde Headwaters State Park, create a public perception of the value of this, reinforces the idea this is a national treasure. And so if you're going to do anything with groundwater pumping in the Big Chino, you better be very, very careful. So this state park, it'll be a decade before it opens to public use. So that's pretty cool, huh? And Representative Bliss was very much in favor of this and has been supportive of this whole effort. She's really helping us on the Wild and Scenic project also. So another solution is that the Nature Conservancy and Salt River Project got together a $22 million war chest to purchase conservation easements in the Big Chino Valley. So this is, you purchase from the landowner. It's a willing seller, willing buyer deal. The development rights are held by a non-governmental organization. So the land will never be developed. That means that that reduces groundwater demand. They can't sell water, preserves open space. These are ranches. They can continue their family heritage of ranching. Cows don't drink as much water as people do. So this is a good thing. This is a great and good thing, except the recent federal funding cuts have suspended the funds for that grant program. There's something else for y'all to work on. Another solution has been to transfer developable land to public ownership. So in the far northwestern forest, this is, I think, Williamson Valley Road goes up through here. We had this checkerboard land of Forest Service land and private land that was owned by Ruskin. And it's called Yavapai Ranch. So there was 45,000 acres of checkerboard land up there as part of the Yavapai Ranch. And there have been a number of development proposals for that, but land advisors and Salt River Project, the Nature Conservancy, are working on acquiring those lands and transferring to Prescott National Forest. So there have been 5 phases on this. Phases 1 and 2 are done. 3 and 4 are in process, and number 5 is we're writing letters of support for it now. These 5 phases of transfer of private land into public ownership have been the #1 national priority for uses for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Well, that's phenomenal. See, this is important stuff. You know what the Land and Water Conservation Fund is? It's federal funds that are to be used for parks and land acquisitions for public purposes. It's funded by a tax on oil and gas withdrawals in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's now uncertain. So elections have consequences, don't they? Another solution is outstanding Arizona water status. So I've been working with the Water Sentinels since 2015 to have Arizona Department of Environmental Quality designate the Upper Verde as an outstanding Arizona water. So this is a provision of the Clean Water Act, and it requires a non-degradation of water quality. It only covers point sources. So we applied in 2017, and they stiffed us really bad, and we reapplied again in 2021, this time with assistance from the Citizen Science Department Division of ADEQ, and we put a really strong thing. I mean, it meets all the requirements. This is a designation by rule. You just have to do these things and you've got it, in theory. ADQ is just sitting there not doing anything right now. And so this is pending. Sierra Club's pushing on it. We're going to win eventually. Oh, I might point out that this is ADEQ's horrible map, but You can see the non-attaining status of all the waters in the Granite Creek watershed and the subsidiary creeks. Those are all impaired for various nitrogen problems. Granite Creek down to the Verde is uncertain, but the Verde meets it. Sycamore Creek meets it. This section of the Verde also meets it, but ADQ defines sections of the river in a really stupid way, so we're locked out of that part. But we're really we've made some real progress on this. So what you can do is you can support this Wild and Scenic River area, Wild and Scenic River campaign. We've got a website here, should be easy to remember. There's literature on this on the table. Here's the Citizens Water Advocacy Group's website, cwagaz.org, cwagaz.org. That has a ton of information in it about the Verde River. And here is the Grand Canyon chapter's section of their website that describes our efforts to protect rivers and streams throughout Arizona. So, there you go. Thanks for sticking with me for so long. And if you have questions,